Hi, my name is Annie. I'm currently a sophomore at the Harker High School, and today I'm joined by a 2013 Nobel Prize laureate in Physiology and Medicine. And so my first question for you would be, what first got you interested in science, and what's a moment when you realized that research was really what you wanted to do?
I grew up in Southern California, in Orange County, and when I was 11 or 12 years old, for my birthday, I received a present of a small toy microscope. And I remember taking a jar that my mother had from the kitchen, and I went to a local stagnant pond, and I scraped off a jar full of pond scum from the top of the jar, from the top of the pond. And then I went home and I put a drop on a glass slide, and I looked at the slide, and you may have seen things like this. You see these creatures swimming around, single-celled organisms or multi-cell organisms crawling around, and I just became endlessly fascinated. It was just unlike any experience that I recall. And I spent hours and hours in my room just trying to figure these things out. And one evening at dinner, I told my parents about this, and my father was quite skeptical. He thought I had a vivid imagination. So I remember I became offended at his not believing me. So I used to babysit and mow lawns and deliver newspapers, and I decided to collect, to save up $100, which is a lot of money, 1962, a lot of money, to buy a real sort of professional microscope. So I saved it up, but I could never quite get to the $100 because my mother kept borrowing my money. And so one Saturday I finished mowing a neighbor's lawn, and I was I worked myself up into this, really being very upset. So I rode my bicycle to the local police station, and I told the duty officer I was running away. I wanted to run away from home because my mother was stealing my money and I couldn't get my microscope. So they called my father in, and he spoke to the captain, and he came out looking very angry with me. But we rode to a pawn shop in Long Beach, and I got a Bosch & Lomb student professional microscope for $100, and that became my pride and joy throughout school. And every year I worked on a science fair project of my own design, and mostly working with microorganisms or with red blood cells or something that I could use my microscope. And that was what really propelled my interest in microbiology. And when I got to university, it was initially with the intention of eventually going to medical school, but I had the opportunity to work in a research lab in my first year as a freshman. And that changed my attitude completely, and I decided, no, I'm a scientist, I'm not going to be a doctor. So I told my parents this. They were a little disappointed, but they got over it. So then on, I just was completely absorbed working in the lab and papers when I was an undergraduate. And then I got to Stanford, and I got into, I was in absolutely the best biochemistry department in the country, not possibly the world. And I did my PhD with a very famous Nobel Laureate by the name of Arthur Kornberg, who won his Nobel Prize for discovering an enzyme that copies DNA, called a DNA polymerase. And I learned from him to really systematically take problems apart piece by piece, and then from then on, I was going to be an academic, and that was the only path for me.
Yeah, a really interesting story. I might have to tell my dad to get me a microscope. Yeah.
Whatever. Yeah, this is the thing that I think is what really helped me tremendously, and other kids too who find an interest in science through their own individual creative instinct, and that, better or worse, is certainly allowed in the American educational system, but particularly in the Chinese system, the individual instinct is suppressed. The educational system is so focused on too much of the sort of memorization, and all preparing for this one ridiculous test at the very end that determines basically where you go to university. And
yeah, parents love telling me about their experience. They're like, I
think the Chinese educational system, its strengths in some ways, and in some ways it stifles individual initiative, which is not good.
Yeah. Next question would be, like, in your career or like schooling, what was harder than you expected about doing like research?
I knew, as I was even at university before I went to graduate school, that research is hard work, and at the time it fails for some stupid reasons and some that you can't quite understand, and you just have to be patient. And learned as time went on, particularly when I was in graduate school, that it's very important to have a big question that you're going to ask, a big challenging problem for which you think you have a way forward. You can see a way of proceeding. And then the problem is big and you remain excited about the goal, then all the failures are getting there.
Yeah.
Most scientists are too conservative. They pick something that's the next obvious thing to do, or just pushing what they've been doing, just continuing to do it. And I think the best people are the ones who really take a bold step forward. And an example I often use when I speak to Chinese communities about this is a brilliant scientist by the name of Roger Tsien. Won a Nobel Prize for discovering, using a discovery of a protein you haven't learned about yet, I don't think, called green fluorescent protein. It's a protein that is intrinsically fluorescent.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, GFP it's called for short. And it was, he implemented the use of this in a way that really revolutionized our ability to visualize proteins look and behave in living cells. It was really revolutionary. Anyway, but he came, he was a brilliant kid. He came from extremely and accomplished Chinese family from Hangzhou. But his father did his PhD at MIT, and then the family was raised in New Jersey, and the father was, I think, some big company, or maybe he was a professor, I don't know. But anyway, going back many generations in China, a very famous family. And Roger was when he was a kid, so he wasn't out there, he was downstairs in the basement, experiments on his own. And in high school, he to the very top, he was the scientific in the country, the Westinghouse Science Talent Search. He won first prize, so he was just a genius. And he went to Harvard, and then he went to PhD in Cambridge. And we had him here for some years on the faculty at Berkeley. And he just do anything. He was but he was a brilliant person. Anyway, I wonder, and I speak about this when I visit China, what would have happened if his family had remained in Hangzhou? Would he have been able to express his creativity, given the strength of the Chinese educational system? And I'm not certain he would have been nearly as successful had not been in the freewheeling American system. So, anyway.
Yeah. So I think another thing that kind of connects to this, I guess, is what do you think besides just being about biology matter to
I think I have original thoughts, and I'm creative, and I about things deeply when I'm working on something, and I think it's of getting to the core of a problem. And I have very strong work ethic, and I have great discipline, and I want to focus on something. And and I think what I learned in graduate school, and I think it sort of matched my natural tendency, is focus. Find something that you're passionate about, then just focus. And so I'm asked, how is it to get all A's in school and best in everything? And I say that I'm some people who get all A's, because that's me that they haven't really found their passion. People who get all A's who then find their own passion later on. But when I was in high school, I was academically successful, but there were other kids who were clearly smarter than me, based on test scores and things like that. But they were not as successful in their career as me, because I think they had that maybe creative instinct. A very driven person.
Yeah.
That helped me.
Yeah. Gearing more towards high school, for students who are curious about research, because I know, personally, a lot of people, including me, are, we don't know where to start. Where do you think is, a kind of first step?
Well, in case I had an amazing mentor in high school who actually came up to me when I was still in junior high school, or what you now call middle school. I had in the county science fair for my project. It was 9th grade. And he came up to me at the county science fair and he said, you don't know me, but I'm going to be your biology teacher next year in high school. So, and he has interested me not only through high school, but later on he visited me in my laboratory here in Berkeley, and even called me the morning that he saw that I won the Nobel Prize. He sent me a text or an email. And so he was really devoted to me. And that helped. He wasn't, an experimental scientist, but I think it was that a little bit his guidance, and then a similar person I had in university, and then even more so my mentor. It was that guidance that gave me the insights and the desire to see at a high level.
Yeah. Branching off a little bit onto this, like, what do you think is the best way for like a school like student?
Right. Okay. So that was your question to begin with. So I think in high school, if you have a biology teacher, that you should ask him or her to help maybe people who will laboratory that you could join. I get lots of inquiries from high school kids who want to come work in my lab, but I can't, at this point I can't take any high school students because I have Berkeley undergraduates as well as PhD students. But for a younger faculty member, there might be somebody who's going to take you on for a summer project. So see if your high school teacher can get you that kind of...
I guess more about careers, like what do you think like often high school or people in general misunderstand about like a career in research?
Oh, I think they don't have any conception about what it's like. When I was in third, I had a physician friend, and he over, because I had an incubator in my bedroom, which was powered by a light bulb, controlled by a rheostat, and I was growing things on Petri plates, and my father was worried what the hell I was growing. So this guy came and looked. Of course, he couldn't tell himself, but apparently he told my father, he said, discourage him from going into microbiology. There's no money in it. So, I never told me this until much later, but even if he had told me that, it wouldn't make any difference. I didn't care. So, I mean, this conception is that, interested in biology, it's just much, in a way, to be a physician.
Yeah.
But different career path. Mm-hmm. And so, I have a lot of, and I say this, with respect, but a lot of Chinese parents, push their kind of, profession like medicine or law or engineering and not so much into science. Mm-hmm. And so you have to decide for yourself.
Yeah.
So I think it's good to have that experience, even in high school of, own thing and designing experiments and thinking about how it works and thinking about it yourself and not only just reading textbooks, but going out and reading yourself.
Yeah. Could give like one bit of advice to your high school self. What do you think it would be?
Well, I think it would have been really helpful for me if my school teacher was great, but he was not an experimental scientist. Mm-hmm. And and the family was an educator or a physician or a scientist. So I really didn't have access to a university.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how I would have done this, but I should have been a big improvement on my training if I had been exposed to somebody who was really a professional scientist. And I'd have that until I went to university myself. Mm-hmm. So then I was able to see firsthand what an experiment is and designing it properly and having controlled experiments. And I had no conception of that in high school.
Yeah. The last thing I just wanted to ask, is there anything you wish like more students like high schoolers or like even schoolers knew before deciding whether or not research is like truly like...
Well, you can't, until you get into a real lab situation.
Yeah.
And I don't think most kids can really experience that until they go to university.
Yeah.
It's there that you lab and you realize, oh God, this experiment's going to go all night. And, oh God, all that work in it amounted to nothing. The only time where you can have a sense of whether this is something that you could actually deal with. It's not, experimental science is not for everybody. It's only for a small number of people who have the patience or who are willing to, so my department, molecular and cell biology at Berkeley is huge. And it's largely because there are a lot of kids in it who want to go to medical school or into the medical profession. And a lot of them try to get into a lab, I think often it's just to get a good letter of recommendation. But they experience the lab, and a lot of them probably don't like it, it's just for them. And so a lot of these kids are very smart. They can learn infinite amount of stuff, and they can do well on tests. And that'd be more gratifying for them than to occasionally have an experiment that works. And a lot of them will then choose to go into medical school because they do well on tests. They're willing to work hard, and at the end of it, it's not particularly risky. It's a safe bet. Your parents will be proud. This is risky, and the only people who succeed are the ones who are willing to take risks. And so you have to be possibly know until it's in university.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Thank you.
All right.